Call this meeting of the Lakota Local School District Facilities Committee meeting on March 6, 2023 to order. Welcome to our new location board and staff. And we'll have to get used to this system, so let's just play it by ear tonight. And if anyone has any questions, we'll just put those out there as we go. Mr. Zink, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. D. Here. Ms. Bodie.
Present.
Ms. Casper.
Here.
Ms. O'Connor.
Here.
Ms. Schaefer.
Here.
Ms. Fuller.
Here.
Mr. Hatfield.
Here.
Mr. Sarge.
Here.
Mr. Vogwin. Here. Mr. Zink here.
Board, you should have, I believe, meeting minutes from our last facilities meeting. Are they in here?
Yeah.
Agenda.
I'm sorry, yes. We're going to approve the agenda first, but are the meeting minutes in the packet?
Yes.
Okay, I know you'd sent those out ahead of time, but didn't know if you'd included them here. All right, Board, I need a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you, Mrs. Schaefer. Do I have a second?
I second the motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Bodie. Go ahead and call the roll.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Ms. Bodie.
Yes.
Mr. D. Here. Ms. Casper.
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield.
Yes.
Mr. Sarge.
Yes.
Mr. Vogwin. And Mr. Zink, yes.
Thank you. We'll move to number 3 and approve the meeting minutes for our last facilities meeting, which was December 5th, 2022, and you should all have received that ahead of time. It's also in your packet. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the meeting minutes on December 5th, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. Please call the roll.
Ms. Bodie.
Yes.
Ms. Casper.
Yes.
Mr. D. Yes. Ms. O'Connor.
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer.
Yes.
Ms. Fuller.
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield.
Yes.
Mr. Sarge.
Yes.
Mr. Vogwin. Yes. Mr. Zink, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Zink. Mr. Vogelman, the floor is yours.
I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sargent and Hatfield this time. They just have some documents in front of you that they're going to walk us through on where they are with the facilities plan and talk about some ideas and get some input, and then talk about next steps and go from there. So I turn it over to our review panel today.
Great. Last time we met, we talked about the various plans and narrowed it down to an option that we're going to consider moving forward. The general theme of the plan was we're going to look at options that have a structure of K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12. So when we're looking at that, you have a question?
Can you pull the mic a little bit closer to you?
A little bit?
Yeah,
Is that better?
thank you.
Yes, so when we looked before, we set the structure for K5, 6, 8, 9, 12. So our next step is to really look at those various options within that piece that we talked about in option 4 last time. So today we're going to discuss what option 4 could look like based on our last discussion. And then we're going to go in and look at some additional considerations that we can continue to look at moving forward. So you're going to have 4 separate packets on your desk. They're the big sheets. The first one is we're going to go over the topography of the different sites. We're going to go over site layouts, proposed attendance zones, what those would look like, and other options for consideration in next steps. So that will be the flow for tonight's meeting. So if you have any questions as we go through, just let me know, and the team will try to answer as best we can. So the first set of documents we're going to go over are called the zoning topography study. You'll see there's 4 different sheets in here that we're going to review. And basically what we thought was, okay, let's take an overhead look at the site, look at the topography, and look at what things may be a challenge as we look at the various sites that could be possibilities for the 2 new high schools in the K5 building. So on the first sheet here, you'll see the Hopewell site. It's on the screen as well. And it shows the entire site of Hopewell Junior, Hopewell Early Childhood. It's sort of like a U shape with a Faith Community Church in the middle. So if you look at that, from our perspective, there is, it's fairly open, it's flat, there's not a whole lot of topography you would have to worry about. There is a creek that runs through the property that we have to be considerate of, and just our neighbors at Faith Community Church would have to be considerate about them as well. But from an overall topography and structural layout, there was no glaring concerns from that aspect. Is that correct, Jim? Correct. Okay. Any questions about the Hopewell site? Yes?
I have one. I believe that the new Kroger is going to be going in that location, right next to, right, north, I don't know if that's north, but if I'm looking at the paper, north of Hopewell Junior, there's a new Kroger that's going in right there.
Yeah, that's about 3/4 of a mile to a
Yeah,
mile north.
It's where the
Yes.
activity center is, the
Yes.
old library. Yeah, that's
It's
not,
closer to Towlersville Road?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think that that's going to have an effect on the transportation getting in and out of our schools?
I don't know, there's a brand-new Kroger right over by East Freshman that is pretty big as well. We have, and there's one right here at East. So it's probably no different than what we're dealing with right now.
yeah.
Sure.
On that first page, there's two boxes, kind of, what are those two boxes? Kind of behind. By the 870, behind page 870 elevation, there's like a little box next to it. Is that like a utility?
It could be a utility box, yes.
I think it's one of your, I think that's right by the football field. Yeah,
Right. Oh, that's our concession stand slash press box. That's right there by Hopewell Junior. That's what that is.
Chris, do we own all of that land? It's like the church only owns up to that red line?
Correct.
Okay.
Actually, the red line is the building setback line.
Okay.
The actual property line is the darker black
blue line?
line, the dot, the dash dot.
Okay.
It's a blue
Yes.
line on
That's
here.
the property line. The red line is the building setback. So basically, you have to build within the setback of that red area.
Right. Okay.
Any further questions?
About the Hopewell site? Okay, the next site we're going to look at is the Plains Van Gordon Central Office site. It's really considered one large site. So if you look at the topography on this one, you'll see Plains Junior on your left side, the central office, Welcome Center there in the middle, and Van Gordon to your right. And then the dash boxes just to the right of the Welcome Center, that's the Van Gordon farm that the district bought about a year or so ago now. That's part of this property as well. So if you look at the entire site, there are some rolling hills, and it's not all flat there, so there would be some site work that we'd have to consider if we use this site for a future building site. So, but for the most part, it's large, it's mostly flat with some rolling topography that we have to look at from a site perspective. Anything from your perspective, Jim, on this site?
I could just explain the topo lines really quick to you. The gray dashed lines that you see going kind of all over these sites, those represent a 2-foot change in elevation across your site. So the way you can read those is the tighter or the closer those lines are together, that means there's a steeper bank.
Okay.
And then the farther the lines are apart, that means it's a flatter type area. So you can kind of see where, just looking at this in general, you can kind of see where the steeper parts of the site are and the flatter parts of the site are, just so you can kind of see, and that's common on all these sites you're going to look at tonight.
Chris, just, excuse me, curious. When we added the farm property, how much acreage did that add to this? What is that specific
The Van
section?
Gordon property?
Yeah.
Just over 10 acres.
Yeah, a little
Okay.
more than 10.
I just didn't remember. Thank you. Any questions for Chris on this one? Are those the farm buildings?
Yeah, those are all the various farm buildings that are on that property right now. The pond right next to this Welcome Center, the round, sort of round looking, that's the pond, that's right next to the central office.
And then the others, there's the silo, you can see it toward the front, and the others are the farm buildings from the Van Gordon farm. No?
Okay, the next site we'll look at is the, what we call the Woodland Liberty Junior and Service Center. So if you look at this large site here, it contains Woodland, Liberty Junior, and our service center, which includes our transportation department, buildings and grounds, and child nutrition, are all located on that site. So if you look in the box where it says transportation, that's the large building, has our bays. And there is next to the tennis courts, that small box is a transportation, or I'm sorry, the food service and buildings and grounds administrators building, they are housed there. And behind that is a storage bin that we house for tires and such for the service center. And again, the little box behind Liberty Junior is a press box, a small little box behind Liberty Junior. But again, it's mostly flat. You got some rolling areas. It's steeper towards the road, but for the most part, with this, it's a pretty large flat area.
Any questions? Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. And this is the most exciting one as far as topography goes. The West Freshman Creekside campus. So if you look at this one, you'll see on the West Freshman, the Creekside building, up front, the box towards Tylersville, towards the lower left of your map, that's the Career Readiness Academy building. So that is listed on there. The big blank-looking space up sort of the top of the center of your page, that is the old stadium, that's the track, so it's fairly flat, and it's all right there. So the unique thing about this site, if you look at it, those lines are very tight and close together behind the building. There's a very prominent grade that goes up before it gets flat again. So that would be one of the challenges for this site is the steep grades behind the building. I know when it was the original Lakota High School, they had practice fields up there, they had the tennis courts that were up there. So there is large open areas up there, but how usable it would be, would have to go through some site work and look at that. So there are some renderings as we go through this that we'll look at how that could actually play out. But from a topography standpoint, this site would definitely be the most challenging to do anything different with. Is that fair? Any questions about the topography before we move on to the next piece?
Chris, one of the things we've heard is that we have some major water issues in the freshman building. And my understanding is that during storms, it's coming from some of the neighborhoods that are around it. So it's facing to the south. Is that the northern neighborhoods or the to the west? Do we know where the issue is?
We have issues throughout the building.
I know there are a lot.
This past, when we had the heavy rains last week, where were most of the areas, Craig, do you remember? We had, someone says it's a video, they had garbage cans all throughout the freshman building. So it was multiple areas. I don't know if there's any more prominent area than another right now, to be honest.
Unfortunately, the runoff was so severe, we were seeing it in all different areas. Just because it was so much water, such a short period of time, we were seeing it from that entire mountainside. So, I mean, we have drainage issues, it was coming off, and then it would hit the underground drainage, and it didn't have enough chance to catch up. So that's why you saw some other forced water coming in different places.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to the next portion here, and Jim may have to help me out with this a little bit because his team did a lot of the mapping work. So what we're looking at on the right-hand side of the page here is Lakota East High School site. That's sort of the current site of Lakota East, what it looks like. And for representative purposes, we took that site and the amenities that it has on that site and tried to replicate that footprint that Lakota East has on all these different sites to see, okay, how would a high school with the amenities fit into the various sites? So the first one we're going to look at, I got that right, correct?
Yeah. The one thing I would say is the footprint is the same as your current high schools, but if you notice your current high schools are 2 stories. If you kind of did that same footprint, to accommodate the 4 class or 4 grades, you would need to go 3 stories. So it's the same size footprint, but it would be another story high. just so you understand kind of the scale of what you're talking about.
Now, did it say from a zoning perspective on some of these first sets of maps that we were restricted to 2.5, or can we go to 3 in all of these sites?
That would, all these things would have to go through zoning and planning commission and a lot of, I'm guessing that you could get through with 3 stories on these sites. I would think that you could work through some of those issues.
Okay, thank you.
It's a good point, Julie. It does look like it's saying allowable 2.5 stories now, so we would need to go through a process there, but.
Yeah, it would have to be a zoning variance request on our behalf to do something like that. So some of the points for this one would be to consider what is missing. We do not have tennis courts that are on our current high school. We want to have high school tennis courts on this location. That's one of the things we'd have to look at, or maybe be more creative about the layout, but just our general first pass at it, that would be one of the things that would be missing. And the soccer stadium and some practice fields would also be limited. A lot of it is, as you can see, is taken up by parking. We have a lot of parking in that area. We have an area designed for a bus drive, so try to keep any buses that we have separate from any kind of student or staff or visitor traffic. So those were the big considerations for this site. So if you look at it, you can't get equal to equal at this site. You would have to look at maintaining it. Well, the soccer fields now mostly are used at the stadiums for games and stuff like that. The big thing would be your practice fields and things like that you'd have to consider in tennis. Maybe the parking lot, we get a zoning variation on that and have room for a tennis court where part of a parking lot would be as well. So those are things that we consider just at our first glance at this without going into a deep dive. Anything else from that?
Just, which is general on all the sites you're going to see, is we tried to duplicate exactly how many, the parking area that you have on the existing high schools. We basically brought that over, so it's basically equal parking totals from your existing sites to the new sites that we're showing. The other thing that you'll notice is that we were trying to set these sites up so that you could, if you were going to construct a new high school on these sites, you could build it while still keeping the 2 elementaries or your other buildings that still operational, get the building done, and then tear those buildings down, and then put the parking and some of those athletic facilities in. So you'll see some of that thinking into, and that kind of drove some of the placement of the buildings, and particularly working with the site circulation. Everything else, I think, is about the same. We copied the exact stadium footprint, the exact softball, baseball, some of the practice fields. So we were trying to do kind of a one-to-one comparison so you can see those easily. The only other thing I would say is you can look at the acreage. East has 62 acres, west has 55 acres. This particular one has 56 acres total. So, and you'll see those same stats on all the sheets you're going to see coming up. So you can kind of compare them that way also.
I have a concern on this one just because of the Westchester Soccer League is so big over here that the soccer season in spring and fall, I don't know where they would have the availability to put their program, and there's a lot of kids that play soccer over there, including my daughter. So
My
that
daughter
would-
does as well, so that would be definitely a broader community discussion about what we would do. Are there other places that we would have that we could help support that? So again, that's one of the items that we definitely have to look at
Yeah.
if we select this site as an option, we would have to consider is what partnerships do we have right now, who uses that space right now. So that's definitely would be a consideration for sure.
And the other thing that I have is I kind of feel that this is a little premature that we're putting the cart before the horse. We don't even know like what curriculum is going to go into these buildings. We do not know what specifically the school district is looking for. And I think it's a little bit too early to be talking about We need a 3-story house and putting in new high schools. We're not even sure that we want to put up 2 new high schools right now. I mean, I understand moving this along, but I think this is premature. I think we need to decide what curriculum and what we want our students to get the most out of high school.
I don't, correct me, but I don't know the curriculum, knowing what the curriculum in a building is as important as the actual building itself. Then you put the curriculum in. And it's also a really long process. So we have to start some planning. Could we, as we do this, and like this other soccer, so obviously our priority is on the students and their buildings, but I would think that some of the stuff we're doing will free up land elsewhere that we could maybe, because we rent those facilities out to them. So we could possibly use other land somewhere else for them so that their programs aren't displaced.
I think that's what he was saying.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. There's a little bit of an
That
echo
might
in
be
here
sad.
because you're a little
I can't
harder to hear.
I can't hear this well on this, so.
Okay.
You said that.
Yeah, so anybody that uses our spaces now on a regular basis, like Westchester Soccer, LSO in Liberty Township uses a lot of our spaces as well. We have longstanding partnerships with them, so we'd definitely be working with them to look at options and considerations for that. So in regards to the curriculum discussion and piece, we're just looking right now at the building size, what it would be to accommodate the number of students. So what it looks like inside and how it would flow, what would be in it from a curriculum standpoint, would come later through the design process. Right now, we're just saying, okay, if we have 4 grade levels of students at 600, 700 per grade level, what size building would you need, and what are the current amenities at our high schools that you would try to replicate at a new space? That's all this exercise is about. It doesn't get any deeper than that. So there's a lot more conversation that would need to be had about the curriculum, what's being taught, what spaces we need within that building. Would be something further on down the line.
Absolutely, and very soon in the future, what school looks like is going to change because in this nation, they are fighting to let the parents have control of the money and where that goes, and that's going to change our public school systems. And so we need to be aware of that as well. And it just kind of looks like we're dying to build something that, in the next couple of years, they're going to be obsolete. And I'm just concerned that this step is a little too soon.
Why would they be obsolete, just out of curiosity, in 2 years, in a couple of years?
Because of my previous statement.
These buildings or these plans don't go up overnight, so we have to start somewhere. And we have buildings that our kids are crowded and we can't service the children we have now in some of our buildings because we don't have any space.
I just am concerned that we're wasting money on something when we don't know where this nation is headed with the parents being in control of their financial dollars. And as of right now, there are many schools that are struggling with their curriculum. And I do not want our school, our district, to be put in a bind. I mean, some of these look really great, and I really like these ideas, but I'm concerned financially, where are we going to be in the next 2-3 years? And when the money is back in the hands of the parents and they're not happy with.
You can't speculate what's going to happen. The money isn't in the hands of the parents yet, so we shouldn't be speculating on future legislation while we try to figure out how to make our buildings so that each student has a place to sit. Like right now, Cherokee is crazy crowded.
Okay, so 2 points I just got from you. The money is not in the parents' of the hands right now, and we shouldn't speculate into the future.
Oh, Darby. What I said is we shouldn't plan our buildings on future legislation. Listen to my words.
Let me take us back to the agenda because we've got quite a bit to get through. I think the conversation that you'd like to have, Darby, is probably not a bad conversation to have, but it isn't appropriate to this particular agenda. So, Chris, I had a question about, you had mentioned the tennis courts would not be there.
Correct.
Did I hear you correctly?
Correct.
About the tennis courts?
In this current layout, there was not space that we could find readily for tennis courts, so we didn't add them on here.
Okay.
So
Tennis
that
and
doesn't mean they
soccer.
wouldn't still be.
Tennis
at
and
the-
soccer.
In soccer. So that doesn't mean we couldn't still use the space at the current high school for that. They just want to be on site at this
Okay,
location. So that's one of the challenges we'd have to work through if we go with a plan like this.
Okay.
A little bit like what we had when we opened youth, they played soccer over at Hopewell for a couple of years
Right.
before.
all right, any other questions on the Hopewell site? Go ahead, Chris.
So the next site is the Plains Van Gordon Central Office site. As you can see, again, it takes up a large portion of the site with the central office sitting in the middle, Van Gordon on one end, Plains on the other, and the high school in the middle. So on this one, definitely, as we talked about, it's a topography sort of in the middle. We'd have to do a lot of site work to make this work out pretty well, but as you can see, for the most part, it fits. We're missing tennis courts again, right, Jim? I don't see tennis and soccer again. So again, soccer doesn't need its own stadium like we have currently at West. If we have a practice field, they play their games now in the stadium, so it's just a matter of scheduling. So I think practice fields are turfed, multi-use fields would probably be more use than a dedicated field for soccer. But those are, again, further conversations that we would need. Anything from the site flow or anything?
There again, a commonality with all these plans is we tried to separate bus traffic from the regular car parking type traffic. So you can see the bus, we're bringing in a bus loop off of the Swordsville, Westchester Road over there, and then basically all the public would come in off of Princeton Road. But I think that's about it on that.
Any questions about this site?
Do you know what the acreage is for this one on just the high school portion? I know that the total acreage is 92.5, but do we know what just the high school piece is by any chance? Just in comparison to like east and west.
I would have to go back and see what Plains and Van Gordon has labeled for its site. I don't know offhand. But I can get that for you, though.
I was more curious to see how it compares and everything.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
The next location we're going to look at is the Woodland Liberty site, which includes also the service center as well. So if you look at this site, again, this site is a little bit more of a struggle in terms of, you get fit softball, but there's no baseball, no tennis. Again, a dedicated soccer field is not there. In addition to that, in addition to Plains and Woodland, it also displaced the service center. So the district would have to look at where do we relocate the service center in the transportation office. So that would be a big consideration to look at if you want with this plan.
Any questions? Go ahead, Chris.
The next one isn't an optimal one, but it's just something that we looked at as far as on the Liberty Woodland site. If we kept the service center there, but just built a building and the parking for the students and had kept all the amenities at Lakota East High School right now, what would that look like? So basically you have a building there with this parking, but all the other amenities would be maintained at the current high school. So you could put a high school building there without anything.
So put the building there and all the stadiums and stuff. That's kind of like Nathan did when they redid their gym is not in their name.
Right. So it's just another option we looked at, but
Would there be room to add additional fields to support the junior high that would be moving into the east location if that were done? Or would there not be room? Because otherwise you're then trying to service junior high and high school students in the
Right.
same facilities.
right, yeah, there is green space behind the stadium and by the baseball fields that you could look at for additional space for sure. But enough to accommodate everything, that's a great question.
Further questions?
I did notice that a lot of the property, the acreage is diminishing and we're trying to squeeze these buildings and what we need into this smaller acreage. And the best one, the acreage would be the Plains Van Gordon site, which is 92. However, what I see is the problem is the land, because there's so many different elevations in that how would that affect the price and what you have laid out? How is that going to affect in actuality if we can actually build that because of all of the land changes in elevation?
Well, I think Plains Van Gordon one isn't as severe. It would definitely involve site work for sure, but how much that would add to the total cost of that, we haven't got that deep into that.
Would that make
process yet.
the price go up significantly?
Not necessarily, no. I don't think it's major site work. When we get to the next page here with Lakota West Freshman site, I think you could have a lot more costs associated with site work there because the changes in elevation are so severe. I think that the most you have a change in elevation at the Plains was like 10 or 11 feet, which isn't that big if you spread it out over the entire site.
Well, and to Kelly's point, that Plains Van Gordon site doesn't exclude what is actually needed as acreage to service Plains and to service Van Gordon.
Right.
So you would have to deduct out the acreage for those parking lots and those facilities before you could really do an apples to apples from an acreage perspective.
Right. Yeah, again, this is just a high-level exercise to see, okay, if we want with this plan, what could this potentially look like? What are our challenges? What things we still need to address? So we're still at that high, we've gone down 5,000 feet to look at the next level. And the last one here is the Lakota West Freshman site again. Looking at this, we could fit the stadium, a new stadium where the current stadium was, put a softball field or baseball field up top. But again, we're limited in the overall space to fit all the amenities that we have at our current high schools in this space.
Don't show enough parking on here either, Chris.
Okay, yeah, and the parking,
Does not match.
yeah. If we took space for space and tried to transfer it over to West Freshman, we'd be short the number of parking spaces that we currently have.
So you couldn't make the same amount of parking spaces work on this one as they have at East and West, is that what you're saying? Sorry.
You probably could, but there again, you'd probably lose the stadium or have to do a lot more grading work or that kind of thing. So I guess what we're trying to show with this option is this probably trying to get all the parking, a new building, you're really pushing this site. I mean, I think that's kind of what we're trying to show here is maybe this is not a great option for trying to put a high school there. Unless you don't want to do the athletic fields and that. You can make it work, but it is on the smaller side, for sure. It would be kind of a building and parking would be.
And I'm assuming any multi-tiered parking structure is price prohibitive.
Typically, it would be, but anything can be done.
It's a good thought, but there are a lot of adults that don't drive well in those. I don't know. Chris, how many parking spaces, just round number, are we talking about at our high schools? Is it on here?
It looks like about 1,100 if you add those up.
I think between 11 and 1,200, right around there.
Okay. It seems like a lot of this is obviously driven by parking because of our high school drivers, right? Any other questions or information you want to give us on this?
Not for that.
Anyone?
Okay, the next section is your next sheets. We're going to look at possible attendance zones. We looked at based on the size of the buildings and what it could be, where it would be, possible attendance zones as a first glance. Again, this is just an exercise looking at who lives where, current numbers, but it gives you an idea of what it could look like. But we'll move on to this one. So this first one is a look really at our K-5 buildings and how they would be, where we would repurpose the East Freshman, repurpose Ridge, repurpose Plains into K-5 buildings. And if you remember, we built 2 new high schools and 1 new K-5 building was an option 4. We would look at sites either at Hopo or Shawnee for that large K-5 building. But if you look at this, compared to all the other schools, that one building is probably more than twice as big as the rest of our K-5 buildings. So if we just went with that model, that's what it could look like. From my perspective, it wasn't great, so I wanted to look at what it would be if we went from one K-5 buildings to two, how would that look? So on the next, any questions about this one before I move on?
Yeah, I see there's like a little brown spot at the very end of the green. There's a 37. Sorry, I'm sorry.
35A?
Yes, thank you. 35A, and then just northeast of that is 37. Could those not be more, could they not flow a little bit better and move the 35A into the green so you're not breaking that up, and neighbors are not going to separate schools where 37 could be combined with 30 and 29? That way it's more fluid.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell on this map, but if you look at 35, that block there's chunks of living spaces here, but the rest is all commercial. So you have like Meadow Ridge Apartments, you have North Ridge Apartments, you have the Princeton Trailers over there by Trinity Pub, then you got the other trailer, I forget the name of it, over off Rialto Road. And you have the other one right off Rialto too, the subdivision, I can't recall the name right now, but there's different pockets of different places, so they're not really neighbors. And if you look at like 35A goes to Ridge right now. 35A is basically just the Meadow Ridge Apartments.
Okay.
That's all that's in 35, even though it looks like a big block, it's really the Meadow Ridge Apartments, and that's it, right off Mulhauser Road.
And it's surrounded by commercial.
And it's
It
surrounded
still
by
seems to me that would flow better that other way, the way that I just mentioned.
And there's 200 kids that live in 35A, and there's no other room in those other buildings. Unless you make this new elementary even larger and did it there, which is a possibility. But then that would reduce Ridge by 200-something kids, and that'd be a really small school. So.
What's capacity at Ridge?
So the next option.
Chris, what's
sorry.
capacity at Ridge? Current.
Ridge, I think it's right around 700, right around there.
So we would be
We've had way more than that at some
we
point.
would be underutilizing them.
What's
if we
that?
reduce that
If
number
we went
from
down another 200, it would be way underutilized.
Okay.
Are these numbers based on current enrollment or are projected enrollment from the
Projected what it'd be
demographic
at the
study?
10-year mark. We're sort of right now where we're projected to be, so.
Okay.
And again, these could change a little bit. So on the next slide, we looked at splitting that one massive large building into two K-5 buildings. I know that wasn't part of option 4, but from my perspective, to have one that's so large is an outlier from the rest of our community. It didn't seem like it would be the best fit educationally or otherwise for our students. So if we look at doing two smaller buildings, they fit more in line with the rest of the district for K-5 buildings. So you could either, depending on where the high school site would be, you could look at the Hopewell site, you could look at Shawnee, or you could look at Adena. Those would be the 3 sites you could put 2 buildings on. So, and it provides better connectivity and more of that community feel instead of having kids from the whole southern part of our district go to one building. So, again, as we talked about before, option 4 is sort of our baseline, and from there we'll start looking at a variety of other things. So, this is just that look at what it would be 1 mega building versus 2 smaller.
Okay. Questions?
So just to be clear, sorry, because I'm having problems kind of hearing you. You're saying that this last little piece that we looked at would create smaller class sizes because we're building a new elementary, there's a new elementary Hopewell or Adena, that you broke that section down a little bit more?
I don't know, it'd be smaller class sizes. Instead of a building with 1,600 kids in K-5, you'll split those 1,600 kids into two buildings. So those 2 buildings would be pretty representative of the rest of the K-5 buildings in our community. So all the buildings have between 500 to 700, 800 kids. So it's splitting into two would keep it along those lines to keep them,
Instead of on that first page, instead of 2 buildings with 1,596,
instead of one building.
it would be these 2 buildings with 800 each. So instead of that giant building, it'd be too small.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Chris.
Again, it gives you an idea of what that could look like. We go on to the junior schools. The junior schools are basically the same boundaries as our current high schools. I did not change any boundaries for 9 through 12 when I looked at the boundary piece. So they've worked for us thus far as keeping our enrollment balanced. So I didn't make any modifications to that current high school boundary, which will become the middle school boundary moving forward. And the last one there is really looking at the site locations for the possible high school sites if we go with that plan. Some of the things that we need to look at there are, right now we have one high school in Liberty Township, one in Westchester Township. Would it be an issue we have both of them in one township or not? That'd be something that we would need to discuss. That would become an issue depending on the site selections. Any questions about the possible attendance zones?
How does, okay, so for the 912 attendance zone, how does that differ from our split currently?
The 912 is the same.
Okay, I'm sorry, just said that. Thank you.
I didn't change our 912 attendance zone at all. Our current 912 attendance zone would become our 6-8 attendance zone if we go to the middle school.
Okay.
And high schools remain the same attendance zones. The next one we'll go through real quick. We're running close on time here. We just started looking at other options, considering, okay, what else can we think about beyond this? And looking at Westchester Township, this map here is of Westchester Township to show what kind of large spaces may be available for us to consider. And there's not a whole lot in Westchester Township. So if you look at that, that's pretty much it. So there's limitations in Westchester Township for large spaces if we want to do something besides our current sites. That's all that shows. The next one is looking at an option, the property next to Lakota East High School, now that's for sale. If we wanted to look at acquiring that at some point and put the new high school there, where you can get some benefits of already having your stadium there, so you maybe do some upgrades, but you don't have to replicate an entire new high school supporting fields and that nature if you put a new building there. So that could be an option, but again, that would have district buying property at that point to do that. So we wanted to look at that piece, and the last one was looking at another large spaces, the Liberty's Junior Woodland site. There's other pieces of land around there. There's not a whole lot of option unless we work with Lakota Sports to look at that piece of land right there. But there's other private businesses that we would have to partner with if we wanted to do anything else. So, but moving forward, this is sort of our first step in talking and looking at things and seeing this laid out actually on paper now. I wanted to ask the board if we can consider looking at more variations within option 4, keeping the same grade band, but looking at taking a deep dive, talking to Jim. Could we look at doing high school additions? How hard would that be? What would that look like if we put high school additions on our current high schools and kept those as high schools and building 2 new middle schools? That could be one option. So you still keep the same concept with middle school, the K-5 buildings. Another option would be the same thing, looking at additions, using Plains and East Freshman and adding on to those to be your middle schools because they're already pretty good size. You do additions there, then building more K-5 buildings. K-5 buildings are a lot less expensive to build than new high schools. The additions, if we could figure out how to work that, would be a lot less expensive than doing a brand new high school without repeating all those amenities for athletics. I'm sure we'd have to do some upgrades or do some things different for those spaces, but that could be a lower cost alternative that I'd like to explore that keeps our K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 concept that we've agreed upon so far. So that would be my suggestion for next steps, to look at those kind of options as well. in addition to these.
So I'll go back, I'll start that conversation and then ask the rest of the board to weigh in. I'm interested in any options that we have for saving money, as long as we think that's going to be effective and more efficient. I think it was option 2 that had the additions to the high schools. I really did like that part of that option, so I'm very much open to that. I also think when you look at the parking and the way things are laid out, there's not going to be a completely replicable site if we move it away from our current sites for high school, so wide open to it. Someone else like to comment?
I agree. I guess as I looked at that, my concern, I don't like not being able to have all of the athletic facilities that students are going to access, not be right there, to be able to walk out and have access to their school, their lockers, all of that whole piece when they arrive, did cause me concern. So it makes me even more interested in some of those other options. I did like kind of the concept of having our high schools have the most flexibility, because again, to the point of making sure that we are agile enough to be able to meet whatever changes come down the pike, because none of us can anticipate what's going to happen in the next 20 years. I liked being able to have the high school be the most agile building, but I certainly think we could do that with an expansion, as well as then having our junior highs have that very flexible working space that we're seeing now in design, so that we can meet whatever those student needs might be.
I agree with you, Julie, and I think that raises the point about transportation for our freshmen and our sophomores to be able to participate in extracurriculars too. And that would be another logistical issue to solve, so.
Right.
Really?
Where do we have room to expand here? in this building?
On this building, well, we've got all those fields where the baseball fields are in that whole area. You know, you probably have to rearrange the flow of the parking lot and things like that, but there's plenty of physical space.
Over there between them. I think it's one thing to have a tennis court at the high school and you have for a separate location, but 2 of these plans have just high school buildings and nothing else on site except for the West freshman site that's have a football stadium back there, but it's not very,
Right.
no, it's not very large.
You know, Adam talked about too, if we do convert the high schools into middle schools, our parking lots are way oversized for what they need for middle schools. So what do you do with that? Do you start, you know, chop them up and get rid of them eventually so you don't have to maintain them? So you start looking at things like that. So I like to go back and start looking at, just as, like I said, the first blush at it, you know, we got time. So let's go back and look at a bunch of different things that could be more creative, more cost effective.
Very, more, like I said, more cost effective to build those K-5 buildings without any facilities.
Right.
And without the need for the same parking and.
Yeah, and until you actually sat down and put it on paper and look at the sites, you go, you know, it sounds great, until you put it on paper,
Yeah.
right? So,
If you could just add to the, I would be interested in seeing that option.
Mrs. Bodie, Mr. D?
I agree with you on all your points.
Mr. D? Will you pull your mic in a little bit, Mr. D? Thank you.
The sport facilities. I thought maybe there's more solution to that for that. But, like I said, we have to want the future. If you don't want to do the future, if you don't want, you already want to do the future, in America. This is how it's putting that together.
All right, it sounds like you are free to go and consider some other options, and we'll look forward to what you come back with.
And thank you, because this really was tremendous progress, and I was having a hard time conceptualizing exactly how this would all fit, and I think this kind of shows us where it can and absolutely really can't. So thank you for all the work that went into this.
Is there any information that anyone needs at this point in time that they haven't gotten, that you'd like them to explore? All right. Thank you all. Appreciate the work. We are going to adjourn, and we will come back in at 6:30 for our next meeting.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Bodie and Mrs. Schaefer. Go ahead and call the roll.
Ms. Bodie?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. D? Ms. Casper?
Yes.
Ms. O'Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Fuller?
Yes.
Mr. Hatfield?
Yes.
Mr. Sarge?
Yes.
Mr. Vogelman? Yes. Mr. Zink, yes.
All right, board will meet back here in about 5 minutes.
Um,